Hello all, and welcome to the 473 Ghost Podcast, where we mansplain film and media theory. I'm Jenell, and I am one of your hosts.
And I'm Adeline, and I'm the other host. Today we'll be talking about Celine Sciamma's 2019 historical drama, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. We'll also be joined by two very special guests, film theorist LAURA Mulvey and Bell Hooks. Now, you may be asking yourself, isn't LAURA Mulvey deceased? And to that, I respectfully remind you that this is the 473 Ghost Podcast, where every week we interview at least one ghost. Our methods, of course, vary episode to episode, but today we have our trusty DIY Ouija board.
And with that, let's get started. Portrait of a Lady on Fire focuses on the blooming romance between two French women living on an isolated island.
Marianne is a painter who has been commissioned to create a portrait of Eloise in order to be sent to Eloise's future husband. However, the two women fall in love with each other over the course of a few weeks, and at the end of the film, they must part ways.
The film was nominated for Best Motion Picture in a Foreign Language by the Golden Globes and nominated Best Foreign Film at the BAFTAs. It also won Best Director at the Alliance of Women Film Journalists, and it did incredibly well at festivals, winning Best Screenplay and Best Queer Film at Cannes Film Festival.
One notable and noticeable aspect of the film is that it's devoid of any major male presence. For the majority of the film, it is only Eloise, Marianne, and Sophie who are present and speaking on screen. LAURA Mulvey is a highly esteemed film theorist who writes extensively about the male gaze and its role in cinema, among other subjects. Laura, can we get your opening thoughts on the film? Oh, Jenell, write these letters down. I'm getting a T, an H, an E, F, E, M. Wow. Thank you for these opening thoughts, Laura. A quick translation for our listeners. For LAURA Mulvey, these female characters have their own gaze. Marianne and Eloise spend the majority of the film actively looking at each other. Though Marianne is the painter and the one presumed to have an active gaze, the film reveals that Eloise spends just as much time looking back at Marianne.
That's very true, Laura. The camera emphasizes these moments with insistent close-ups on the women's eyes and the way they continuously gaze at each other. As the film goes on, they spend more and more time looking at each other in action. They pick up on each other's habits. Marianne points out the way Eloise touches her lips when she's emotionally moved and bites her lips when she's embarrassed, while Eloise points out that Marianne touches her forehead when she doesn't know what to say and breathes through her mouth when she's troubled. And this is why Marianne's second portrait of Eloise comes out looking so incredibly lifelike and accurate, because she has taken the time to truly understand Eloise with her gaze.
Mulvey also writes in her essay, Visual Pleasure Narrative Cinema, that in a world ordered by sexual imbalance, pleasure in looking has been split between active male and passive female. The determining male gaze projects its fantasy onto the female form, which is displayed accordingly. In their traditional exhibitionist role, women are simultaneously looked at and displayed, with their appearance coded for strong visual and erotic impact so that they can be said to connote to be looked at-ness.
There is an interesting reciprocity here in Portrait of a Lady on Fire that isn't present in most modern films that take on the traditional male gaze. In films such as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and even the recent Spider-Man Homecoming, we see the film from the male perspective. The female characters are looked at as items to be desired, pursued, or looked at, and although they may also pursue the male characters in these films, we never see the male characters from their gaze. There's a complete lack of exchange, and therefore the power imbalance is maintained.
That's really true, and even in films that are supposed to be feminist, they can objectify women as well. We have Ocean's 8, Red Sparrow, and Atomic Blonde, which all feature really strong female characters, but they're also very much sexualized. Oh, I'm getting another message from the Ouija board. When we Pair this with the story of Orpheus and their discussion of why exactly he looked back at Eurydice in the underworld, where Marion states, "I think Eurydice asked him to, thereby giving agency of the gaze to the women." It is clear that the film is an effective antithesis to the male gaze. I totally agree with you there, Laura. I definitely think that, again, the act of choosing to look over and over again is a form of reciprocity that is absent in films made by and for male consumption.
Yeah, and while we have you here, Laura, can you also speak on other storylines written for the film? For example, Sophie's role as a maid.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jenell, because class is definitely an issue in the film, but Laura is saying, regardless, Sophie's abortion storyline is one of empowerment, which literally represents women taking control of their own bodies. They are afforded an agency in the context of what is still a heavily contentious topic. Marianne and Eloise are now the ones who take care of Sophie, who fetch her water and tuck her safely into bed, who take care of her when she is weak and ensure that she is supported.
Wow, that is so insightful. And while we let Laura's spirit take a break, let's hear a note from our sponsors.
Do you miss going to the movies? Do you miss the smell of popcorn in the air? Do you miss sitting next to strangers in a dark theater? Well, MoviePass has a deal for you. MoviePass is having a special COVID offer. For only $9.99, you can watch 19 free movies per month. Who says a pandemic can stop you from going to the theaters?
Do you have really shitty movie opinions that you wish everyone on the internet could see? Boy, do I have the website for you, letterboxd.com. Starting this month only until the end of the year, you can get 15% off of an annual pro prescription. That's only $150 instead of $200. Follow us also at Jenny Lou and at Adeline with 2 E's to hear our movie opinions. Welcome to our next sponsor, Tarot Card Readings by Film Students. For the low price of $5.99, we will answer any question you have about any of your film classes. Today, we will be answering the age-old question, am I going to get a good grade on this final? That is awful. Cut the cameras. Weird. Welcome back. Now we have our second theorist on the line, author, professor, and activist Gloria Watkins. She's better known by her pen name Bell Hooks. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello.
I think you mentioned that you wanted to start off by rebutting some of Laura's points.
Yes, specifically, I wanted to talk about the oppositional gaze. As I've written in my paper, The Oppositional Gaze, the male gaze is inherently white, and this translates to the female gaze as we see it in this film. This follows a larger trend in which women are only allowed to have agency in films if they have petite, feminine, and white bodies. We even see this in action films such as Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel. With the case of A Portrait of a Lady on Fire, there is an absolute absence of BIPOC representation in the film. Every single character simply is white. And so Laura's theory of reciprocity in female gaze is inherently flawed in its non-intersectionality.
Wow, so you don't believe the film is a good example of the female gaze?
I wrote in my essay, the oppositional gaze, that with the possible exception of early race movies, Black female spectators have had to develop looking relations within a cinematic context that constructs our presence as absence, that denies the body the Black female, so as to perpetuate white supremacy, and with it, a phallocentric spectatorship, where the woman to be looked at and desired is white.
Oh, I'm getting a message from Laura now. And what about my theory of reciprocity?
I believe that Eloise is actually still the object of desire in the film. The story is told from Marianne's perspective, so we are still adopting her point of view towards Eloise. We don't see Eloise's face even after the character is introduced. She does not become a whole person in the narrative until Marianne is given the opportunity to look at her face while they are on their walk on the beach. This is very different from Marianne, whom we see and understand from the very minute her character is introduced in the film. And although we are not seeing Eloise through a phallocentric lens, the woman to be looked at and desired is still white. She is the epitome of white feminine beauty with her Eurocentric features and her blonde hair.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about it like that. What are your thoughts on the time period this film is set in?
I believe that this film demonstrates the way in which intersectionality cannot exist in the modern era. Lesbians are allowed to exist in the white female gaze, but are not allowed to exist in the present day. They're removed from us by time and space.
Oh, I'm getting something again from Laura Mulvey. 1 second. Mulvey is arguing that the time period that Portrait of a Lady on Fire allows for a more nuanced exploration of female love under the patriarchy. It is due to the character's time period that we are able to truly understand the way in which these women are pawns in a larger system of oppression.
I actually disagree completely. The time period in which the film takes place is an excuse to keep gay women from ending up happy with one another. This is a flaw in queer representation that has been brought up by many film scholars who point out that LGBTQ+ characters do not receive the same happy ending as their cisgender heterosexual peers. Laura Mulvey, respectfully, check your privilege.
Well, fascinating discussion we've had today, ladies.
Yes, thank you both so much for your time. Let's cut to our second sponsor of the evening while I lay Laura's spirit back to rest and make sure we haven't accidentally invited an evil spirit into this room.